Dr. King, this is a historic event happening here. First of all, give us a scene setter. Where are we and what is happening here today?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say we're in St. Lucia. And of course, that's the best place to be right now. And I say so because I was listening to Hilary Beckles.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will be starting in 3 minutes,
exactly
has a special
3
place
in the history of the Caribbean and the world, not only in its own development. And I think that this historic occasion you're speaking of is, I am hoping, a seed of something much better to show what we St. Lucians can contribute not only to our own development, but to Caribbean and international development. That's what this is really all about. We believe in ourselves, we have the confidence. We know what we can do, we know what we have produced. We are actually at the Royalton Hotel, and it's really thanks to our coalition of partners that have come together. The St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Association, who have been a stalwart really in driving this agenda and making resources available for us to come together. And that has been really, I think, groundbreaking in many ways, to have these kinds of partners on board with what I would call a holistic social, human development approach, which is what we are trying to do over the next couple of days, at least to define what do we understand is human development for us, and how can we as civil society contribute to the human development of this country.
What is being done to ensure that this does not become just another of the series?
Interesting. The Citizens for Peace and Prosperity is a coalition that came together a year ago. And as our chairman, Mr. Nurani Aziz, says, this is a marathon, not a sprint. We don't expect to change the world overnight, but we expect to start the change right now. And we know that we have many steps to make. We know we have a long way to go. But we are committed to the long haul, to persevere. What we need to do, though, is find that common ground, declare that vision, understand truly where we want to get to, and understand the journey that we need to take to get there, and then see how we can negotiate our way. That's called faith, and that's what we have. And I mean, I've seen it manifesting itself over the last year, because where we have reached to with this One Love, One St. Lucia campaign, I think is quite phenomenal. It's not this grandiose or in your face and road shows. However, I think it is a very powerful mental and spiritual message which is permeating through the psyche of the people. Just the billboards alone throughout the country. And people are saying, well, what's that? What does that really mean? And I think that's the first question. What does it mean to be a St. Lucian? What does it mean to have holistic human development, and what is our role to get there? Because coming out of this, each and every one has to leave with an understanding and a commitment, understanding of what they need to do and a commitment to do it. Because Mr. Aziz, Dr. King, Bernard Fanis, no one of us can do this on our own. We have to do it together. Imagine this morning, Commissioner of Police is speaking to me, and she's telling me, Doc, we really have to come together and make, as a country, and have a consensus on how we are moving forward to make this the kind of place that we all want it to be. That's what it's about. That's what we're here for. So, I mean, hey, will it just be another talk shop? That's going to be up to us, each and every one who's here. These people who are here, I think, are important people. They have selected themselves, as well as we, knowing some of them, have urged some of them. But the commitment has been amazing, and I think that, for me, makes me have confidence and the faith that it's not going to be another talk show.
So we can stand by for the start in just a few moments. We'll be getting a lot more details of what is going on there. We appreciate the initiative, and we certainly, as you mentioned, it's not just people inside here, but viewers as well have a role to play in all this as well. So thanks, and we'll look forward to the opening in a bit.
Thank you. And in fact, the viewers out there, you're in here. Take care.
So we continue our conversations here this morning as we wait for the start of this One Love, One St. Lucia Koudmen for a thriving civil society event here. First of all, Mr. Decarius, talk to us about the significance of this event, why you're here today and what you think can come out of it.
Well, I was invited by both Dr. King and Dr. Jimmy Fletcher, who are comrades of mine, and we've been deliberating the situation in St. Lucia for many years as friends, and they invited me here to come and hear my piece. As many people know, I'm involved in the whole cannabis thing, and a lot of people here, a lot of young men have absolutely no pathway to upward social mobility because of lack of education, because of poverty. So there are deep hindrances to many of these young men getting jobs, and as a result, no money, they turn to crime. And we have to devise ways that we could bring these young men into civil society. And I have some ideas. I'm sure everybody knows the idea already, but you know, agriculture is one of the ways. You don't actually have to be super highly educated to be involved in agriculture. You just have to be hardworking and have a desire and a goal. So I'm here to show that agriculture may be a pathway for these young men to get involved in work that they could actually elevate themselves and stay away from crime.
In fact, this event is starting in just a little bit. We've had a few of those. What is it that needs to be done to ensure that this one is a little different in terms of the outcomes?
Well, you know, that's what I told Dr. Fletcher. I hope it's not going to be another talk shop. I've been to so many talk shops and nothing has happened. Case in point was the Permandu that we had right here, that we spent $13 million. And I think our greatest problem in the Caribbean and in the region is implementation. We have great orators and talkers who can, you know, really express themselves verbally, but get this stuff done on the ground. And, you know, not boasting or blowing my own trumpet. I'm somebody that gets stuff done, you know, with little resources. So all the talk now, when talk done, let's get the implementation phase done. And I am skeptical that we are, because a lot of implementation takes financing. So who's going to finance this? So it's about finance and implementation.
Thanks a lot. Good luck with this event.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mr.
We'll talk
Finance.
at the end of it to see how it works out. Yeah.
I know we're running a little late, but we have to make allowances for those who are very fit, like Mrs. Barbara Jacob-Small, and those who are not so fit to take that trek down the road. Barbara, you know I had to single you out. You're just too fit for everybody else. Welcome to our Koudmen 23, our civil society consultation. But before I say anything else, I would like you to please stand for the playing of our national anthem. Thank you. I'd like to ask you to remain standing. We're not doing the normal someone coming up to pray. We would just ask you to spend a few minutes, 1 minute, in some personal reflection on where we are as a country, what we would like to see come out of this event, and any other personal intentions. Thank you very much. You may be seated. Okay, good morning again. You will find that the presentations and us from the podium speaking to you will be kept to the barest minimum, because really today and tomorrow, half day tomorrow, are really about you coming together, working together, and coming up with solutions. It's not about us speaking. So my welcome is a very brief one, to say welcome to the consultation, welcome to Koudmen 23, and now to call Ajani Labon to deliver some opening remarks. Ajani?
Good morning, everyone. Let me firstly begin by just sharing how grateful the organizing team of this civil society Koudmen is for having you here with us at this space. Let me also share how much of an importance it is for critical stakeholders like ourselves to be gathered, to brainstorm, to consider how best can we work together, how best can we build those relationships required to move and shift our society in the direction that we require. Let me state that this is really an auspicious event for many reasons. At this present time, given that we're celebrating our 44 years of independence, it's a time for reflection. It's a time for us to look back and to look forward, to see where the gaps are within our society, to see within our society, how are we treating our people, how are we creating systems and processes for our people to be meaningfully involved in the development of the country. So this is the time for reflection, and this perfectly aligns with the celebration of our independence, moving forward, celebrating one people, shaping our destiny. The purpose of this Koudmen serves to promote greater inclusion within our society, and to ensure that within the development processes, there is an equal voice for all corners and all young people of all backgrounds, young people of different orientations, and of course different perspectives and mindsets on what development or what shape development will take. So youth are at the center of this activity. And for the young people who are here today, of course, I tend to say also that youth is not necessarily an age, but a mindset. So I think we all have the perspective that young people should sit at the heart of development. It's also important that we think about how can we generate a greater sense of autonomy and independence among civil society. How can we seek to mobilize the resources required and to also piggyback to benefit from the shared resources that we have, knowledge, expertise, to be able to shift the movement to create a better society for us all. But there are key challenges that I think we all need to recognize, firstly, as we seek to bring our ideas together. This group is not fully representative of the society that we live in. And we must recognize that within this space, or at least within the national environment or the national landscape, there's a greater need to create the spaces and the avenues for individuals, communities, groups who are not necessarily given that voice to speak to their issues and their challenges. So indeed, this is a start, but it's not an end to this movement. And it means that we need to find the opportunities to bring those marginalized and disenfranchised groups into our conversations, and hopefully, of course, we expect to move on from there. Secondly, there is need for systemic change to stem the issue of crime and violence within our society. And we do recognize that beyond our conversations and our consultations, within our system, there are fundamental gaps that our people must recognize and our leaders must acknowledge. So we must also look at the possibility or the realization that, as I was speaking to Yenva at the back, that a revolution indeed may be required. Thirdly, political will, that we will recognize a lot of what we discuss here may need a bit more agitation so those ideas will come to the fore. And we must ensure that political will, not just for our leaders, but of course, if we also identify ourselves as leaders, then it means we must start that movement. And in our individual conversations and engagements with the people on the regular day, or at work, or as we move along our merry way, that we have and we continue the conversation of change and the positive contributions that we can make individually to driving that movement. So thank you all for being here. Quite familiar faces, and I'm sure as we go along in our discussions and deliberations, we'll move forward with something critical that we can then take forward to the rest of our society as a shared perspective on how we can push development and create a peaceful and prosperous nation for us all. Thank you very much.
Recording stopped.
Thank you very much, Ajani. Now I would like to call to the podium Mr. Noorani Aziz. Noorani, I won't say why I'm calling Noorani. Noorani will tell you why he's being called. But before I call Noorani, just let me sort out the technology, because we are live to Zoom and live to a lot of other things. So we need to get Noorani's presentation on, which I think we have right now. So Noorani, it's all yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so very much for taking time away from your families and your other weekend obligations. Many of you are weekend warriors in other spheres. And for taking time off to come and spend a couple hours today, well, the whole day today and much of tomorrow with us, to delve into some of the real issues that Ajani referenced in his presentation, in his opening remarks. And before I jump right into explaining some of the work that will lay the foundation of the discussions today, I just want to share two opening thoughts with you. The first is that for those who came thinking that this was the makings of a political party, I'm sorry to disappoint you. This is far, far from the truth. You may leave now. Secondly, this is not the beginning. Today actually is really momentous for us as Citizens for Peace and Prosperity, because it represents essentially a full year since we started this discussion in a conference room at Sandals Halcyon, hosted by Sandals, where over 30 organizations started assembling to discuss what we as civil society actors can do in order to move the needle of change in our country, to support the good things that are happening, and to advocate for what resources are needed and what talent is needed to bridge the gaps that still exist. My grandfather was a farmer, and he often said that sometimes to get better crops, you have to till the soil. And today I'm hoping that this represents a full year's worth of tilling. And so over the last 12 months, this group who quietly dubbed ourselves Citizens for Peace and Prosperity labored to engage with a number of very critical thinkers at a community level, people who we thought needed to be heard, much like Ajani referenced in his statements, and needed to be included in the conversations that were being had, and who probably felt there was not a forum for that engagement. And so personally, collectively, small groups within hosted sessions, we sat with kids on the block, we sat with youth who were marginalized, who felt marginalized. We sat with community organizations who felt that they were under-resourced. And it's been 12 months of speaking to dozens and dozens and dozens, attending hundreds of meetings and hundreds of phone calls to try to move this needle forward. And so what we started working with, I think within 6 weeks of sitting down in February of 2022, was the development of over 30 initiatives that went north of $20 million to finance. And so we set about engaging with the good service, the good help of Dr. Jimmy Fletcher, to really try to crystallize these ideas, and so 6 bridges were formed. These we called 6 bridges to peace and prosperity. And they are not the end of the ideas. We do not present this to you as a conclusive effort, but we're hoping that today, in your discussions, you are going to dig into some of these bridges and maybe even expand it. And the expectations of you over the weekend are going to be expounded on by Dr. Fletcher in a bit. But essentially, we said, look, in order to create a more peaceful and prosperous society, in order to foster human development and to ensure that people felt included in the discussions, there needs to be empowerment of individuals and communities, more of that. There needs to be better use of the creative arts as avenues to increase self-worth and identity. Improving parenting and child development was a fundamental part of the foundation that needs to be crafted. Creation of a violence interruption unit, and even looking at some of the great existing work that violent interrupters were doing right now, needed to be brought into the spotlight, funded and expanded upon. Using sports to build community connections and mobilize for peace-building initiatives. I took a flogging from Mr. Pereira this morning for having entered into conversations in 2018 on how this could be used in a more empowering way and supported by the tourism industry to build community connections, and sadly, we dropped the ball. But then it came up again over the past year among the discussions within the Citizens for Peace and Prosperity as something that really needed to be built upon. And then the improvement of recreational infrastructure within community spaces so that we can nurture a more recreational environment within which families can blend out of their homes and communities can connect and interact. Over the past 12 months, a number of ideas cropped up, a number of projects evolved, and this is just an example of the first bridge, and they're not in any particular important order of importance, but the first bridge, for example, empowerment of individuals and communities, a number of programs were designed, and we simply lifted about 4 or 5 of them that we felt were easily actionable. And we set about having conversations with various organizations on how we could unlock financial resources and talent to making them possible. So repurposing of the YEEF fund within the St. Lucia Development Bank, creation of micro businesses, creation of employment database, youth apprenticeship program in schools. These are just some examples of the types of projects that we felt fell within the ambit of empowering individuals and communities. And so we started our work in engaging and trying to access funding. There have been successes if you've been paying attention to what's been going out on social media and traditional television. We have been trying to share our success very quietly with people because we know people are motivated by accomplishments. It keeps the wheel turning. And so we went after the proverbial low-hanging fruit in order to motivate and inspire that movement. Creative arts. We funded the Warehouse 11 project. We made a contribution towards that project. We're also looking at establishing youth choirs and orchestras, youth competitions, musical stuff, performing arts, literary arts, visual arts. How do we get more of these activities on the center stage throughout the year as part of a community development strategy? And that becomes customary and part of a way of life of our people, and not just something that's had once, twice, 3 times a year. Parenting and childhood development, serious deficits perceived. to share with you, we just don't have the time to share with you some of the information and studies that have come forward. And when you look at the data and the science of it, you realize that we are where we are because of certain things that have not been done or which have been done incorrectly. It's as simple as that. And if we were to go back to basics and try to correct these things and introduce new things, it's amazing how we can indeed move that needle forward in a positive way. Again, violence interruption, one of the units, some of the ideals that we have, some of the thoughts that we've been engaging in discussions around, Peace League, football, building community connections, improving recreational infrastructure, some of the ideas and the discussions. But the thing is, we were trying to go after actions that were within our ambit and within our reach so that we could build momentum. When I look in the audience today and I see the amazing diversity of representatives and the amazing cross-section of organizations represented here, I'm really inspired and encouraged that you guys can lend your wisdom to this discussion that has already started and to rip this apart indeed, and with the good help of Dr. Fletcher and his team, pull together something that we can all be so very proud of and work towards. A number of people who called me in preparation for attendance says, I hope this is not another talk shop. That is not the intention. No speeches, no major talks. Real hard thinking, solid action plans. So when we step out to the room, not only do we have an idea of what needs to be done, but we have a good idea of how you can continue to get involved and not just come, lend your intellectual strengths to the discussion and walk away thinking that you've done it all. We need foot soldiers, we need boots on the ground, we need shoulders to the wheel. The harsh reality is that you will all agree, time, human, and financial resources are running out. And so we cannot approach these discussions in a business as usual environment. It must be business unusual. And as is posted up there, we're hoping that as we move together, we can all reap the dividends of peace and prosperity based on inclusion, ownership, and the collective pursuit of human and economic dignity. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Norani. Okay, that mic is in nice space. I'm joking, thanks. Okay, now on to why we're here and how we're going to work over the next few days. Let me just walk you through that very quickly. Sorry, I'm juggling technology and everything else at the same time, so I need to switch from one presentation, and the great thing is Norani's presentation was in 16:9 format. Mine is in 4:3, so I couldn't merge them. I know that means absolutely nothing to some of you, but I just felt I had to say it. Okay. Right, so if you can get the presentation up right. So really, what we're here to do over the next day and a half is to think of what can civil society do, not what we want government to do. We have no control or authority over what government does, but there is a large space that civil society needs to occupy, a large role that civil society has to play, and this is what we're trying to define. What can civil society do? What is civil society already doing? Because there are many of you in this room who represent civil society organizations that are already doing quite a bit of work in that space. So we really want to leave here with a few goals, which I'll go through in a while. But for those who don't know, I said this was the password, Koudmen 23. So the agenda. We will go into breakout groups after the break, and start to roll up our sleeves, literally and figuratively, and not just the 6 bridges that Norani spoke about, but expand it to a much broader conversation about the interventions that civil society can make to help move our country forward, to help achieve the twin goals of peace and prosperity, because we believe that that's a simplification, the simple distillation of what it is that we're trying to do. A peaceful society where everyone has a path to prosperity. So the goals of this really are, first of all, arriving at an agreement for civil society groups to work together to improve socioeconomic conditions in St. Lucia, particularly among the most vulnerable and at-risk groups. We have to agree to work together. There are many of us that are doing things. We like to criticize government for working in silos, but very often we work in silos too. We don't bring our heads together. We don't see how we can add support to what some other civil society organization is doing. So we're hoping that we will get a map of what it is that some of us are doing and how we can add support to that, and outlining a pathway for how that can happen. But also identifying the gaps. Where are there gaps? What are the things that need to be done? And we did a survey, we sent out a survey which is still being populated, but I'll share with you the results of that survey in a while, which paint a very clear picture in my mind of where we believe civil society has the greatest strength in helping to deal with the challenges that confront us. And identifying a role for civil society in catalyzing transformational change. We think this is extremely important. We can't continue at the same pace at which we are. The world is moving. Our external environment is dynamic. That's probably the biggest cliche you'll hear me say here. But we're not responding to that dynamism. We are moving not just at a business as usual pace, but sometimes at no pace. And we really are moving, we're slipping. So we want to see how can civil society catalyze some of that transformational change that's needed. The results of the survey to date. Interestingly, this is probably the first survey that I've done that has been dominated by the older age groups. Most of the surveys I've done, primarily because they've been online surveys, most of the respondents were in the age group of 18 to 24 and 25 to 34. The respondents here are a little older. Evenly distributed between male and female. Unfortunately, we don't seem to have anyone from Viewfort South or Viewfort North who has contributed to that survey, so we need to address this. The survey is still live, it's still open, so we're hoping that we can get a much wider distribution. It's too skewed for Gros-Islet. I mean, I know Gros-Islet, the Gros-Islet community is what, 70,000 out of 175,000 people, but still we want to see a broad cross-section of St. Lucia, as Ajani intimated. In which of the following areas do you believe civil society should focus its attention? And really, the areas that were pointed out were community empowerment, support for vulnerable and at-risk groups, supporting youth, and mentorship, apprenticeship. These are the four that receive the greatest, over 50%. There was promoting good health and wellness, helping to create new avenues, new economic opportunities. But those four, I think, were the consensus that this is where civil society needs to focus its attention. Today, we're focusing our attention much broader, but this is what so far is coming out. And when you ask, how can you help? Again, most people said supporting youth, mentorship, apprenticeship, warming my heart, environmental awareness, promoting good health and wellness, community empowerment and support for vulnerable groups, and also promoting food security. Now, we will break you out into groups when this is after the break, because there are, we believe, people who are ideally suited to give attention to certain areas. This is fluid, so you can move around, but we would like to have roughly equal groups. So we're looking at a group to look at community engagement. What are the things that we need to do to ensure that our communities are more engaged, are more empowered? The creative sector, and that's encompassing creatives and sports. Sports for development and creative sector for development. Social issues, support for vulnerable groups, social safety nets. How do we strengthen these? Peace and security, violence interruption, improving rights and justice. Human development, early childhood development, parenting skills development, education reform, apprenticeship, mentorship, internships. Those are some of the things that we would like to see covered there. The economic sphere, how do we create new opportunities for not just our young people, but for everyone. Everyone needs an opportunity to thrive in this country, and we will be addressing that. And partnerships, how do we create a partnership framework so that we can work together? How do we mobilize resources? What we're hoping will come out of this is that after we've developed this matrix of interventions, we will then engage with our development partners, the diplomatic community here in St. Lucia, but also groups like USAID, UNDP, the World Bank, and others, and see how they can help support civil society in what it is that we want to do. They always say that they want to work with non-state actors. Well, we will ask them to put their money where their mouth is. And having developed the range of interventions that we believe civil society can support, we will look to them to see how we can get these action. Because, as you've said, we don't want this to be another talk shop where everybody comes together. We've seen too many consultancy reports. I remember doing some work in Grenada once and seeing a report that a consultant did who was brought in to look at the nutmeg industry in Grenada. And the consultant, I think somebody from Europe, said to the Grenadians that the market for nutmeg is a little depressed right now, but the market for mace is really good. So they recommended that the Grenadians grow more mace and less nutmeg. That's actually a report from a consultant. We don't want this to be one of these theoretical things that make absolutely no sense. We want to take this and run with it and see how can civil society help. And there's one more group that we want to look at, and that's youth, because it has been clearly stated that we need to provide support for young people. So there's another group that will come up that will look specifically, although youth will factor in the deliberations of all of the other groups, but we believe there must be a special focus on youth development, and we have, fortunately, sufficient young people in this room and others who are young at heart to bring some thought to this. So yes, these are the subgroups that I spoke about, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. We will provide you with a worksheet. I said that we want this to be as paperless a meeting as possible, meaning that we would not be providing you with pen and paper. But those who can still think most clearly with their, as a friend of mine said, her exercise book, her pencil, and her eraser, and she's raising her hand very proudly, that's Bubbles, then you can use that. But we will be providing you with a link to the Google spreadsheet, so you could actually go there and populate it so that everybody reports the same. We want this to be as structured as possible. So what is the problem? What's the problem that we're seeking to address? What are the activities we believe are best suited for that problem? Is this a new initiative? So is this something that, for example, NYC is already doing, or Rice and Lucia is already doing? Or is this something new that we're proposing? What are the key performance indicators? What will be our measurements of success? What are the milestones? Is this a 1 year, something we can do in 1 year? Or is there a 1 year set of goals, a 18-month set of goals, etc.? Which should be the lead organization? Which should be the collaborating organizations? And very importantly, what resources do we need? Now, I know it'll be impossible for most of you to say that, for you to cost something here, but at least to give us a rough idea of what sort of resources. It may be human resources, it may be technical support, and in many instances, it might be financial resources. So to just give some beginning of thought to this so that we can get clear in our mind what are the things that need to be done. Because as I said, this is not a report that's going to sit on a desk. This is a report that really has to be actioned as quickly as possible. And what are the immediate next steps in all of these? So we want you to recommend to us what are the immediate next steps. So the first thing we will do as an icebreaker is I'm going to call on 7 people to join me at this table up front. And I'm not asking for volunteers. I actually have volunteered some of you. So Louise, I've volunteered you. Christine Nikki Paris, I've volunteered you. Sophia, you have been volunteered. Mr. Kendall Hippolyte, you have been volunteered. Richard Peterkin, you have been volunteered. Kina, you have been volunteered. And Gordy, you have been volunteered. These are my 7 volunteers. I want to come to that front desk there. Okay, during the break, not right now, but during the break, those of you who parked adjacent to the golf course, you've parked there at your own peril. There are golf balls that are flying. I know from experience that golf balls have entered my home. So during the break, please, unless you're insured for flying golf balls, you might want to relocate your vehicle. Okay, so everybody has a break, right? Right, so what we're doing now is please follow very carefully the instructions provided for each stage of the exercise. There's a maximum of 2 minutes for each step. And for you in the audience, that's why we have the camera. I want you to carefully observe what's going on. We have the camera so you could see it up front. Look for any interesting interactions and group dynamics, and note anything significant during the various phases of the process. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the first part, I don't want you to communicate with each other at all. You cannot talk to each other at all. Each of you has a piece in your hand, a little block in your hand. I want you, around the table, to join your pieces together in a continuous, so each one touching each other, to form something that makes sense. You only have control of your block. You cannot touch anybody else's block. So get to the table and get to work, put your block down, and you're trying to make something. These things, trust me, these things all work together, they all make something. And it can't be jutting out, so it must be something that is, you can't produce a hybrid, a mutant. It must be something that... Oh, Richard has just left his piece and left it to everybody else. So that's one dynamic you have to note. Okay, you have a jagged edge there, so that can't work. Remember, you can only handle your block. You cannot handle somebody else's, and you can't talk to each other. No, that doesn't quite work. You have a jagged edge. You have two jagged edges, actually. Okay, so like somebody's pointing and telling someone where to put their, you can't do that. You can't point and tell someone where to put their block, and you cannot mumble. You have to keep absolutely silent and manipulate only your block. Okay, so let's change it around a bit. Take back control of your block. So for stage 2, you may now communicate with each other to build a structure. However, you are still allowed to manipulate only your block. So you could talk to each other. You could say, okay, you put that there, you put this there, but you are only allowed to handle your block. So Kendall, you could tell Keena where to put her block. Sophie, you could tell Gordy where to put his block, but you can only handle your block. Okay. Stage 3. With everything that you know, this is what you're supposed to be building. Sorry, can you put it back? It's a square. Well, not a rectangle. This is what you're supposed to be building. Okay, last phase. No, you want some time? Let them do it. No, they won't do it. Trust me, they won't. Next phase. This is how the pieces fit together. We're not getting the... Right, there you go. Okay, you want, okay, let's show them the block again. All right, we'll only cut back to the camera when we put the blocks together. Well done. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So, what did we learn from this exercise? By the way, and I'll give you the story behind this. In 1998, I was in Japan. We were doing the negotiations for the Viewfort Fish Landing Facility. And we went to this remote fishing village overnight. And the television was only Japanese. And apart from Domo Origato and Ohai Gozaimasu, I really don't know any other Japanese. And there were these block puzzles in my room. And it was like 7 o'clock in the night. I had nothing to do. So I started doing these block puzzles. And I realized just how difficult it is. But this particular block puzzle is called the Sphinx. And there are 112 different things that you could build with these blocks. I asked you to build the simplest of them, rectangle. But there are 112 different things you could build with that combination of 7 blocks. So, what are the lessons? First of all, it's not possible to build something new if we are not communicating with each other. Because you saw when they were not communicating with each other, they were hopeless. They only had control of their block, and they couldn't do anything. I mean, they were just putting things together and coming up with a mutant that really didn't look good. Even when they were allowed to communicate with each other, not knowing what they were building was still a problem, because you have your block in your hand, but you don't know what you're building. If you don't know what you're building, you can't build it. And it's much easier to build something if, first of all, we know what it is we're building, and secondly, we're communicating with each other. And I think that really is the message for us here today. We have to have a vision in our mind of the type of solution that we want to build. And we have to know how we individually, through personally and whatever space we control, whatever NGO, whatever civil society, or whatever our interest is, how it fits in that. Because if not, then we might end up building something that doesn't look anything like what it is that we want, and certainly is not functional. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to our 7 master contractors. And thank you, you were great sports. So, as I said, we will go into breakout groups after the break. We will put the 10 cards on the table, so you will have to rearrange yourself depending on the breakout group that you're interested in. We want one group to look at culture, patrimony, identity, and spirituality. And you're allowed to, after a while, if your group has made progress, to move on to another group, but we would like you at least to break the back of your work before moving on to another. We also want to look at community empowerment, citizen building, and volunteerism, a group to look specifically at that. So those are two groups under community engagement. Under the creative subgroup, we want to look at sports for development and revitalizing clubs and community spaces, and creative arts for development. Under the social subgroup, we want to look at health and wellness as one component, and safety nets and vulnerable groups, at-risk groups. What interventions do we put in place for vulnerable groups, and what sort of safety net should we be looking at? Under the peace and security group, we want to look at police-community relations and violence interruption as one group, and rights and justice, freedom of information. Quite a few people said freedom of information is extremely important. How do we have access to what is going on, what's happening? And it's not just a freedom of information bill that will make that happen. It's a change in culture, it's a change in mindset. So we want one subgroup to look at that. The human capital development group, we want to look at two areas: education reform and early childhood education / parenting skills. How do we come up with an education system that is more responsive to the environment in which we live, the dynamic environment in which we live? How do we ensure that our people get the right human resource development so that they can be citizens? And we're not just talking about the hardcore curriculum things like math and English and the sciences, but conflict resolution, money management. How do we cause our education system to cause our young people to be productive citizens later on in life? And also internship, apprenticeship, mentorship, and retooling. And remember, this is about what civil society can do. We don't want recommendations on what government should do. We can probably have one or two lines about how government can support, but this is about what we can do to help ourselves. What can we do, not what we want government to do. The subgroup that's looking at economic capital, how do we provide greater support for local enterprise? You know, we have many young people who are doing some great things. There's this young man I like to reference, Carlos Noel. Carlos developed a solar-powered desalination plant. One of the biggest issues we have in this country is water scarcity. So you'd think that we would tell every hotel on this island that they should invest in Carlos Noel's solar-powered desalination plant. It's zero energy. It handles waste very well. Every hotel on this island should be using Carlos Noel's solar-powered desalination plant, but we're not pushing it. We have Joannan, who did his algas fertilizer with sargassum, and we have a big sargassum problem. Why aren't we promoting that and getting our farmers to use the algas so that we create a millionaire out of algas? You know, so these are things that we can do to support ourselves. How do we do that instead of every farmer in this country is complaining about the price of NPK fertilizer. NPK fertilizer has gone from $100 to $240, I think, a bag. But we have somebody making fertilizer in this country from sargassum. Why aren't we promoting that? So these are things that we can do for ourselves. And how do we create economic opportunity, equity, ownership? What can we do to ensure that we expand the spheres of economic opportunity? So it's not just tourism. It's not just agriculture, but what else can we do? Is there space in the digital economy? Is there space in the orange economy, which is the creative sector? The blue economy, our marine space, the green economy. What can we do to promote that? Let's start seeing how we can help ourselves. And the partnership group, you see there are two areas there, but we're collapsing that into one. So resource mobilization, public awareness, and education, partnership framework, engaging government. We must develop some framework for engaging with government. No man is an island and no civil society is an island. So how do we engage with government respectfully so that there can be some sort of symbiosis between civil society and government? We need to articulate that. And accountability and transparency. And the final subgroup is youth development. CARICOM did a really good youth development report, I think it was in 2010, that looked at the contribution of young people or the potential contribution of young people to GDP in our region, and show that if you could reduce teenage pregnancy by a certain amount, what would the contribution be to GDP? How much GDP would be increased? If you could reduce crime and violence, what would the impact be on GDP? As far as I know, that's another one of these great reports that's sitting on a desk somewhere. It's 12 years old, but a lot of the things in there are extremely valuable and still very pertinent. What can we do to ensure that our young people are productive citizens today, not the leaders of tomorrow? Our young people need to be engaged now, not the tokenism of putting a young person on a board and saying, okay, we've done it, but how do we get young people at the table? I'm very fortunate in the work I've done with my Caribbean Climate Justice Project. A lot of that work is driven by young people. And I say to them that this is about you, your future, the mess that my generation has created and is leaving behind for you. I want you to articulate. I don't want to be Greta Thunberg from Sweden. You have to be the ones at the forefront. We have to empower our young people because trust me, they are some brilliant young people. They're much more informed than I was at their age. What I like about the Gen Zs too is that they are cancel culture Gen Z. They don't have time for you. They will cancel you very quickly. But what we have to do is to give them the right information so they don't cancel the good with the bad. And I think that's what's missing. So how do we insert ourselves in that space and ensure that they get the right guidance, but you give them, when you're young is when you're most creative. As much as I love Bob Marley, I know that if Bob Marley was alive now, he wouldn't be making music the way Chronix is making music. Because once you get past a certain age, you're just not thinking as creatively as you were before, unless your name is Kendall Hippolyte. But you know, most of us, once we get past a certain age, our creative juices start diminishing and we don't have that level of enthusiasm and energy. How do we get our young people so that they can be part of what is going on and provide that energy that is required for our country to move forward? So these are the areas. We've kind of taken a first stab at this and put you into various groups. This has to be reworked because, as I said, the partnerships group is going to be just one group and we will take out the young people, we'll do a separate youth group. But this is really what we intend on doing. During the break, we'll put the 10 cards there. I will leave this up on the table and let's do the break. Those of you whose cars are parked adjacent to the golf course, please remove them. Oh, by the way, any questions? I could tell you could park them in my yard, but I mean, there's space adjacent to my home. There's space on the road, but it's a longer walk. Was that Bubbles?
All right, so let's start with introductions first of all.
Hi, good morning. I'm Sophia Edwards Gabriel, and I'm part of the planning committee, and I also work at the Ministry of Education as the project coordinator.
So you were invited to this event. Talk to us about, first of all, when you first heard of it, your thoughts on the initiative itself.
I believe it was quite an interesting initiative. It seemed to address broad areas of our society and areas that we need to look at in terms of enhancing our capabilities as a people. And so it piqued my interest, especially when I saw areas such as social development and human development, human resource development. And so I felt that I really wanted to be part of this movement. I feel there's a lot that we can contribute as citizens of St. Lucia, and so that is why I'm here.
What do you think can be done to try to ensure that this is at least different to other similar exercises?
One of the things that is already being done is that we have quite a large cross-section of our population represented here, people with different interests and capacities, and I believe that we can build on that, and also to extend this to persons in the diaspora who may have varying experiences and capabilities that might be able to help us, and the networking is essential. So I think this is critical here.
Good luck, and we'll talk to you at the end to see how it goes.
Thank you.
Benti, Vice Principal, Babonneau Secondary School.
What about this event that appealed to you, and what do you think you can contribute to make it different?
Well, the social mix and getting to interact and get our students, the human population involved into the broader thing, especially as we're looking at increasing crime and violence, and just being able to dialogue and to see how we could improve that system in St. Lucia.
You're from the secondary school system, and we hear a lot of talk about the youth and the next generation and so on. What is it would you like to see the focus be today to deal with issues that are germinating at the school level?
Okay, well, it's more like the crime and violence, as I mentioned before, community involvement, and just the mere fact that we could build the students' capacity, get them engaged in various activities that would just make them better citizens, especially sports also, and subject areas that would entice them even better than what we have existing at this moment.
All right. So we'll wait to see how this comes out, but good luck and all the best.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Cherry, we are at a very significant historic event. You've been through a few of those, and you're coming ahead this morning. What are your thoughts on how this can be different?
I'm hoping you see here we have more entities, more organizations, not really government. And usually that's what it takes. It takes ordinary citizens to realize the problem, come together and put the fight. Get away from the red tape and all the politics and the division and focus on the issues at hand. And when I look around this room, I feel like I'm at a UN conference, a local UN conference. And it's good. It's a good feeling, and I'm hoping that we can come together, put all of our differences aside and work towards the betterment of this country.
Normally some of these conferences come up with big picture items and so on. What is it that you would like to see happen that can be executed from today?
Immediate action. We know what the problem is. We see what the issue is. Our young men are falling by the waysides. One of the issues is lack of employment, lack of interest, lack of activities for them to do. So I'm hoping to get out of here a plan, an immediate action where we can engage those young men and women.
Now I know there are civil society representatives here, but this is being viewed by general public as well. How can the general public support what is happening here to make sure that there's a meaningful outcome to this?
Well, they can provide input. They know what's happening in their communities. They know what's needed more than us. I cannot know what's happening in Viewfort when I'm sitting in Rosalie. So it's a matter of us coming together. The village, it takes a village to raise a child. That's what we're talking about, that Koudmen mentality. And we're not talking about building homes this time. We're talking about rebuilding our country.
Appreciate it. All the best, and we'll talk to you towards the end to see how it works out.
Thank you very much.